Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the NUS Shaw Foundation Alumni House. My name is Sean, and I'm very glad to be your MC for this evening. Thank you all for joining us at tonight's You Alive, an event brought to you by the NUS Office of Alumni Relations. This evening's program will be in 3 parts. The first part will be a 10-minute talk by our speaker, Mr Hsieh Fu Hua. Following that, there'll be a 20-minute interview with Mr Viswa Sadasivan, Chairman of the You Alive Organizing Committee. And finally, there'll be a 30-minute question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, simply proceed to the aisles where the microphones are located, speak clearly, and introduce yourself as well. This will allow the online community to be able to hear your questions as well. For tonight's event, we will also be using Pigeonhole Live, an online application to collate your questions. So I'll now run you through very quickly the step-by-step process on how to access Pigeonhole Live. If you have a smartphone or a tablet with you, simply launch the internet browser, and in the address bar, key in phlive.at. You can see it on the screen as well. So again, that's phlive.at. And once you're in the site, you need to key in the event passcode, which is UALIVE, UALIVE. So again, the event passcode is UALIVE, UALIVE. Now once you're in, select the top choice, which is You Alive featuring Mr Hsieh Fu Hua, and you may then post any questions that you would like our speaker to answer. You may also vote for questions that have already been posted simply by clicking on the arrow beside each question. So questions with higher votes stand a higher chance of being answered by our speaker. Without further ado, please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr Hsieh Fu Hua.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, that's what you call a short and sweet introduction. I wasn't expecting to actually have to come on stage right, just like this. But I'm glad to be here. I'm actually peeling my eyes out for students, but I don't see many tonight. So, in fact, I agreed to this sharing tonight, largely because I thought I'll be speaking to many students, and I didn't expect actually a lot more seasoned people are here. Well, I just want to start by saying that we live in a confusing world, and all of us who have lived long enough know it's a very confusing world. And even if you haven't lived long enough, what is happening around the world today, with so much news, with so much events, with so many things happening right across the globe, but actually, like what we saw earlier, in the world of media, we actually get bombarded with innumerable images, innumerable ideas, innumerable issues. So, confusing world that way. Also confusing, I would say, certainly living in Singapore, where I think we are all relatively well-to-do. We live in a well-to-do society, and look at this university. When I was here at this university, back then, of course, it was a very different campus. We didn't have this kind of building. We were using huts. I recall the Nissan hut. I'm sure many students today would know what a Nissan hut is. But Nissan huts were largely, if I'm not wrong, built for the military. They were convenient huts. And we studied in huts rather than something like, very nice like this. So I suppose we, are confused because on the one hand, we see lots of issues in the world, lots of needs, and yet we see a lot of prosperity. And that's not going to change the prosperity. In fact, there's a recent book out by an economist. I think he's called Tom Piketty, and he was just talking how the capitalists will just keep on getting richer and richer. And it's not just capitalists. He's talking about university graduates, especially accomplished ones. There will always be the top few who get more and more successful. It's a winner-take-all game. And this actually has been happening for a long time. What we've seen in recent times where wages have caught up and risen, it's a relatively more recent phenomenon in the last few decades after the war, the post-war. So in short, for most of history, the poor shall remain poor. And I assure you that right in Singapore, the poor exist. If you care to go to some, one bedroom, what they call one-room flats, and there are many still in Singapore, you will see the poverty. But of course, they're not hungry in the sense that what we see in Africa, and in the old days, it used to be China. Of course, China, you no longer have those visual images of starving people as you do now in Africa. But the challenge is really the gap between rich and poor. The challenge is really a world at once globalized and yet extremely troubled. Troubled because either it's environmental issues, discord, tormented souls, tormented spirit, and which is really what we see too in Singapore. It may not be so evident to you, and it's an area of special interest to me, the area of mental health, which is why I talk of the tormented spirit. So actually, amidst all this confusion, how does one as an individual deal with it? And you might say, Fua, that's because you are chairman of this, chairman of that. Or you look at some mighty billionaires, and I assure you I'm certainly far, far, far from that. I'm well-to-do by Singapore standards, but nothing close to what you read about, the leading businessmen in Singapore. What can you do? And this is why I address, in fact, the title is not here. I gave the title quite spontaneously to my colleague, Viswa, who invited me to address you tonight. And the thing which came to my mind was, who is at the gate? And this title, Who is at the Gate, actually comes from the Bible. Well, I'm a Christian, but really it's not about Christianity. It's really about a story told in the Bible, which I think can speak across all religion. It's a story where a rich man walks in and out of his house every day, and there's always a beggar at the gate, and this man was called Lazarus. And he will walk in and out every day and didn't take notice of Lazarus at the gate. So Lazarus was poor and hungry, but the rich man didn't notice because he was busy. He just walked out of his house, and then every day he'll come home, and there was Lazarus at the gate. This story appeals to me particularly because it then came upon me this whole idea of nearness. Because when we try and deal with issues, very often we get a bit confused because we watch the news. There's so much to do. If you want to help the world. And that's why the idea of helping has to begin with something near to you. I think the automatic response is the family, right? Well, that's one response. But is it just the family? Is that the only thing that's near to you? So as you put yourself in this question, what is near? Who is near? You begin to see many more things. And the minute your heart opens to what is near, who is near, and you start practicing it, then you realize there are many, many, many more things that are near. It's not just your family members. So I want to throw this question at you, and you may want to throw it back at me, as to how to apply this idea of nearness to begin your journey of sorting out this confusion in the world. What is your place in it, and what can you do to it? I've only shared this story once, and that's to a group of students, and it wasn't recorded. So tonight it's going to be recorded, so I think it might be a little awkward for me, but nonetheless, I want to share it because this whole idea of nearness is extremely important. I was asked this question at the age of 33. I was in the cabinet room, and I was invited at that time. I was young and foolish because, one is at that time willing to explore almost anything. And as you know, you get into the cabinet room because you've been interviewed for different possibilities in government, and I allowed myself to be drawn in. But there was this final interview, and at the final interview, there was this awesome man in front of me, and he asked me only one question. And this awesome man asked me, he says, "What is your long-term goal in life?" Wow, I was stumped. I sat there for 1 minute, couldn't find an answer. 2 minutes, couldn't find an answer, and I actually had to say, I don't have a long-term goal in life. I only do what is in front of me. But I don't think that was an answer that was satisfying. So, file was closed, out you go. So, my life went a different course. But I tell this story only because actually, I think it's the same issue for many of us, right? When you try to think too big, too far, perhaps you don't see. What you don't see is really, what you should see is actually what is right there in front of you. If you do what is right in front of you, I think the rest can take care of itself. So, what is near to me has been somehow an impulse which resonated and has always been a way forward for me. And so my journey on, I wouldn't like to call it philanthropy, some might use the word, giving, volunteering. In fact, if I may add, the giving of your time, your effort, and your heart is far, far much more important than giving your money. It's easy enough to sign a check, but to give your time, your heart, and effort takes so much more out of you. So please don't envy, don't think that those who sign big checks, only those who are rich can sign big checks. In fact, you might say it's easy for them to give because it's only a check. For those who actually give of their time, effort, and heart of their heart, I think that's the biggest gift you can make. So if you think along those terms, really, maybe that's why it's so hard to give, because you really have to give of your heart. So for me, how did it begin? It began actually growing up with my father. So he is in many ways, you might look at big heroes. He was my hero. Didn't think of it then that he was my hero. It's only when I'm 60 that I look back and say, yeah, he's my hero. When I was young and growing up, you take your father for granted. But he did many of those things. He had children at home from at that time a parent boys' home, an orphanage. And every weekend I would have 5, 6 other foster brothers and sisters. No sisters, it was boys' home, brothers. So we would actually spend time playing together every weekend. And then also, he inspired me into the world of arts where he started mixing with a lot of artists. And as you know, back then, as you may know, artists were poor people. They weren't, they had no means because art didn't sell. You couldn't really make money from it. So my father was a friend of artists, and I got to know artists. So these are little things which are seeds planted in you. And these seeds can grow if you pay attention. So through school, through university, I got engaged and active in innumerable activities which had to do with somehow engaging with issues, people, and obviously, doing what you can to help. One of the simple things I did when I was at first year at university, and again, modeled after my father, because if you think about it, what was near? What was near was the way I grew up, those memories. I started what we call an auntie and orphan scheme. which in short brought together orphans from home with university students who are prepared to actually spend their time and give of their time and heart to such people. So that was one scheme. There are many other things that I did and could have, we can do. So I'll just share those examples with you. Perhaps if I just close and we can move on to question and answer, which is really the main part of this evening's session. It's really, in large part, your session and here for me to share my own perspectives with you, is to really conclude in saying to you that the experience of giving is not one way. And you may have heard this before, but once you open your heart, you realize it's not just of you giving your heart away. Actually, your heart starts receiving. You will go through experiences which will enrich your life. So in giving, you actually do receive. And that receiving will enrich you immeasurably. So, Viswa, I invite you now. Join me.
Fu Hua, thank you.
Thank you.
To be very frank, I wish I could just sit there and continue listening. I've been doing You Alive for, this is my third year, every month. And I say this hand to heart, that this is one of the most authentic sessions I've had. And please join me in thanking Fu Hua. We have heard of quiet confidence, quiet charisma. This man epitomizes that. The people who have said, Fu Hua is a man of few words. It's not about quantity, is it? It's not even about fist banging the table. It's about conviction. And conviction, when spoken loud or soft, comes through. And I thank you for reminding us of what we all have, I believe, from the time we are young. It's something that is basic in us. The capacity to feel, care, and give is basic. So the thing that got me thinking is, what happens along the way? Many of my friends, when we have conversations like this, we keep talking about how when we were young, we used to do this. But somehow along the way, we seem to lose the plot and go into a different pursuit. And then you find it very hard to come back to the track again because other factors like greed take over, And I guess my question is, how do we help many of us to sort of get back on track, to go back to the basic ways in which, we had the capacity to empathize. If I could just share something, a thought that came to my mind when you were talking about nearness, As you know, I've been serving on the SYNDA board for some time, for 18 years to be precise. And it's one thing to sit in the boardroom. Right now I'm vice president of SYNDA. We make decisions about the community, about charity, how much to allocate here. He's serving on the board of trustees. We talk about these macro issues. And at some point about 6 years ago, I started feeling very disillusioned because I felt ill-equipped to make those decisions or make the right call because I felt I was losing touch. All my friends were people who were very comfortable, So I decided to take a very small step. Once a week, every Tuesday night, I volunteered to read to a child from a slightly less fortunate home. Once a week. It's just once a week, Tuesday nights, I would go to the house and I'll read to the child for 1 hour. The joy it gave me was incredible. And I did that for 6 years. And I would shift my travel to accommodate that because you didn't want to let the child down. To go there, that's commitment. I'm not saying this to brag, I'm just saying how it touched my life. Being in boardrooms and make those decisions the feelings paled in comparison to that 1 hour spent with a child who just looked up to you and said, thank you. Or the hug you get when he opens the door. You know? So I understand what you mean. I rediscovered that in me. But my question is, there are many people, including many of my friends, who either don't know how to get back or who constantly deny themselves the opportunity to get back on track. What's your advice? I mean, what do you think can be done? And I think there are many of us in Singapore in that state. It's not about good or bad.
Well, I think what you just mentioned is really giving care to someone, in your case, reading.
Yeah.
Not necessarily easy to do. Because when I was at university, one of the difficult things I found was actually serving people with disability, meaning when you actually offer yourself
Yes.
to do it, and where you have to feed someone who can't feed himself, wash someone.
Yes.
It's pretty hard.
Pretty hard.
Must say, even though I grew up, with a father who was very much engaged in helping disadvantaged people, doing that was hard. I found that hard. So actually do things which come easier to begin with. Because doing the hard thing, why do the hard thing when in fact you can find easier ways of doing it? So when I say give your effort and time, think of ways where you can actually do it in the way which you feel comfortable. Just the other day, I have to say I find it very hard to raise money. Although I did Flag Day for quite a number of years. And in fact, help children to experience the difficulty of selling flags.
Yes.
That I enjoyed doing because I've done it before, so it came quite easily. But you will find actually when you put children to sell flags, they all cower.
Yes.
Nobody would actually want to, go up to someone and ask for money. Now, having said that, I still have difficulty asking for money. So I rather do work than ask for money.
Even though you're chairman of UOB.
Well, asking for money for business is easier than asking for money for charity because someone is tempted to give because he sees an opportunity, right? But you're right. It's, it should come more natural to me, but it isn't. So I would say find things which you're able to do comfortably. So there's this lady who told me she's very comfortable just joking with people. That's who she is. So someone like her can actually easily throw parties for, the disadvantaged. And she said, no problem for her. So I think, she's using her talent. So I suppose all of us have to ask ourselves, what is your gift? Start off with that premise.
It doesn't have to be a big gesture.
It doesn't have to be big. It can be big, it can be small.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Yeah.
So for myself, at this stage of my life, I look at it as really using my experience, using my network, using whatever it is to actually give more of myself, including mentoring, including guiding, which comes naturally to me because I've spent so many years doing it. I'm well practiced. So giving can be in so many different forms, not just what you've just described, which is a very intimate thing, which many people might find very difficult in the early stage, the intimacy.
Yeah.
Well, so the other day I decided to do something because I have a charity which we give, and we give ideas, we give, we start new initiatives. But I decided I had to do something that you've just done. There has to be a little more intimacy. So I went down and joined someone, and I look for usually what I call angels. Look for angels, meaning there are people around, and as I said, if you see, they will appear. So will you see? There are lots of people actually out there who are doing all kinds of good things. So I come across now many people who do good things. They approach me because they know of how I can help them. And then I just follow what I call these angels. And you do work with them, and you will be able to be led into this more intimate contact with those who are in need.
But would you say that sometimes it is very hard to get people to move out of their comfort zone and do something different? And one often used reason is time. You know, and this is a standard thing. I mean, whenever I ask my friends, would you join me to do something? Can we try thing? Time. It's always time. And one of the things I'm sure many of us here have experienced, you know, when we go and visit our friends in Malaysia, they always make time for us. When they come here, we're always busy. Has it occurred to you all? When I visit my relatives and friends in Malaysia, they take leave. Maybe they're not really working, I don't know. But they take leave or they claim
Malaysians
to take leave.
take exception to that.
I know, there's some Malaysians here. But you know what? I mean, priorities are different. You know? But here we're always busy running after our tails. We can't make time because we are in some board meeting. We have this tremendous sense of importance, you know. But I don't know. It's always time. I don't have time. I can't. And the strange thing is they mean it. So how do you get around this concept of time as such a scarce commodity in Singapore?
I think the answer is time and time, but the first time I'm using is the time will come. So I am not someone who believes in pushing someone to do something when it's not time. So that person's time will come. And most important is the seed has to be planted. It's no different from how my father planted his seed. He never told me what to do, but my time came. And I knew, and you know, that seed starts growing in you and you will do what has been sown. So likewise, why am I here sharing? Why do I give some interviews from time to time? Although I'm extremely reluctant, I must say this evening.
But you look very relaxed for a reluctant person.
Yeah, because when you decided to do it, you do it.
You do it.
So giving time, meaning I believe in timing. The person's
right
time
time
will come.
Okay.
So long as the seeds have been planted.
But
so this sharing is about hoping to maybe just share and then leave it as that.
So
secondly, the second time is actually, as you say, you've got to give time. Once you've decided to do it, it's a discipline, it's a commitment. So what do I do with my Malaysian friends? I really commit to making time as much as they've made for me. You have to do it if you accept this kind of commitment. So it's a commitment you make in your life. It's a belief, it's a conviction.
Okay.
So doing charity, giving of yourself, cannot be a lazy effort.
It can't be.
And in fact, I can be lazy with many things to do with myself, but you can't be lazy with others.
So I guess it leads me to my question when you talk about planting the seed. A lot of it has to do with who your moral exemplars are. Most of our moral exemplars are our parents, right? I mean, you grow up, and many of us, I mean, the seed is planted at home, right? Quite often the seed is planted in school. Subsequent to that, today, a student spends a lot more time in school than at home, which used to be different when we were growing up, right? So then you're talking about whether the school system and the teachers and the principals are really moral exemplars today, given the emphasis on the curriculum. And then at a macro level, you've got your political leaders, your corporate chiefs as your moral exemplars. And one of the concerns I have, and I'm not sure whether you agree with me, is there are plenty of mixed signals in society. On the one hand, we are talking about we need to serve. We need to serve with the heart. On the other hand, you have signals that come that you will not serve. You can't expect people to serve in politics, for example, if you don't pay them $1 million if they're a minister. I mean, for me, I'm not quibbling with the idea that if you are holding office, you should be paid a decent amount. But I think these issues have really sort of affected people on the ground. I'm not turning this into a political discourse, but I do feel that some of these things have affected our psyche, you know, and you started off using the word confused, right? I think the confusion that we are seeing in society is because of the mixed signals that we constantly are getting. On the one hand, we're talking about this. On the other hand, And then the whole issue of welfarism. The difference between welfare and welfarism is often blurred. I mean, it's like taken the same. If you are against welfarism, you're against welfare. That's not necessarily the same thing. So I'd like to hear your views on that. I mean, we are obviously trying to adjust that policy position, you know. But at macro level, do you think there are still a lot of mixed signals that are they're contributing to the confusion that we are seeing around us? And how do we get around this?
Well, as you say, I'm not going to dwell on this, the political realm. Let's take the charity sector.
Yeah.
We know that the charity sector is filled with people with a heart. And I think the term you used was bleeding hearts.
Yes.
So that's on the one hand. And you might even argue that it's only filled with people with a heart and nothing else. I look at it that actually it's like anything that we're going to do and do well, you need a heart and you need the capability. So I think Man Leong and I, we are in the business world, we know that actually to succeed, you must really have the passion, which is a word used here. So that comes from the heart. So you really need passion as much as you need capability. So when you bring people into any endeavor, I think you need both, those with passion and capability. Hopefully, I think the two will actually share and influence each other so that those only with a heart but no capability yet can actually learn from those with capability, and vice versa, that those who came in firstly because they were capable eventually also find the passion. And if they don't, on either side, either one, I mean, if you only have a heart and no capability, or you have capability and no heart, eventually I think they should drop out. But the fact that you actually should engage both, bring them in, and I think that is the answer, not one excluding the other.
But you do realize you didn't answer my question.
Yes and no.
Should I let you go?
No, please probe further. Take me further.
No, I would really like you to answer the question. It doesn't have to turn political. But there are mixed signals. It doesn't necessarily need to emanate from government. But I'm saying there are mixed signals. You talk to a lot of, and I'm sharing this based on my conversations with young people I meet today. They are confused. They say, look, on the one hand, I need to achieve success. And success is defined in this way. And I'm told that I should stay focused on getting that, and it's zero sum. Okay, so there are a lot of these signals that are coming out. How do we manage that? Because if those signals are not sort of rationalized and managed, we are going to be even further confused down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm picking up on the word you used, which is confused. And I agree with you.
So I think my answer to you was this, that actually success has to be balanced with compassion.
Okay.
So my comment to you is really, much as you only bring in so-called the able, you also got to consider those with a passion, because they are as much part of the equation if we're going to succeed in the long term as a society in many different ways. Hence, success has many dimensions.
Okay. So the question is,
many. So
how do you
extremely passionate, you can be successful.
Okay. How do you make that conversion? I mean, there are people who are extremely passionate as entrepreneurs, right, who are driven by career and success in that realm. Mm-hmm. How do you convert that zeal, that energy, into the charity sector, to the charity? I mean, it's a serious question. How do you do that?
Yes. Well, I think first we have to actually be able to.
I think it's being censored. It's very sophisticated these days.
You're right. You're right.
I mean, look at the timing. They could have done this in the first question. No. Now, when I reiterate the question. But it's recorded. Don't worry.
Yeah. I think that's why we're having this conversation. So it's about sharing.
Yeah.
And out of this sharing will be rebalancing of thinking and views as to what drives people. And there must be more and more people who actually do believe that life is not just about career success.
Do you think that
success as a human being is defined in many more other ways?
Yeah, but do you think we have a critical enough mass of Singaporeans who believe in that?
It's got to begin somewhere.
So,
So where we are today is as good a point as any.
Okay.
So I'm not actually going to engage in criticizing others because that's not how I
no,
look at it.
no. It's not about
You know,
criticism,
yeah.
Fu Hua. I'm saying as president of NCSS,
Right.
what is your plan to change the way we feel?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
do you
the
have a plan?
The plan, which is really my contribution at this point with NCSS, is to bring the corporate world, the business world, more into the charitable world.
Okay.
Not a one-off endeavor.
Okay.
I think we know many organizations do this one-off feel-good day, and then that's it, it's over. It's got to be more purposeful, it's got to be more dedicated. So volunteerism, solutioning, companies actually have the ability to provide solutions. to
Could you give us an
charities.
example so that we understand it better?
Just give an example. The other day, I had a restaurant owner come to me, Fu Hua, I want to get involved, you know, I want to do good, I want to do many things. And this is the person who actually feels comfortable actually hosting big parties.
Yeah.
Comes very natural to
Okay.
the person. And then I said, actually, do you realize we have many old folks home? I know people who have lived in old folks home. Have you tried the food served in old folks home? Day in, day out, you eat that same food. I can tell you, it's very unappetizing because when I visit this old folk who have passed on, they really relish the food I bring them because what they eat in the home is very, very, very
Yes.
basic food. And what enjoyment do you get at that point in life? Apart from, of course, good company and good food. So I said, have you considered maybe bringing your chefs in your restaurant to spend a day a week, to spend time to relook at the whole menu, how to use the same budget that they have and do a much better and tastier meal. That's what I mean by corporate solutioning.
And he did
right?
that.
Oh, she loved that idea.
Okay.
And we're going to work on some old folks' home and try this out.
So
So this is where companies,
yeah,
corporate solutioning, how can we improve the life of others?
and it converts them in the process because it's experiential.
Exactly. And then you bring your colleagues in, staff in, who of course get engaged, and they're using the expertise, and then they realize that the expertise can be brought to bear in many different ways. And hopefully, again, the seed is planted for other good works to come later on. So volunteerism becomes part of it too. It's extremely important.
I guess a related point is what you said earlier about nearness, right? Nearness is very important to you, and I think it should be important for many of us. And I remember on one of my trips to Mumbai, you know, one of the richest men in the world, you know, who lives in this massive house in Mumbai. It used to be 7 stories, now I think it's 23. A house, it's a house, huh? It's not a HDB flat block. And just on the way past the house, I wasn't going to the house, I wasn't invited, so I just passed the house. And it's a whole row of squatters by the drain. And it got me thinking, you know, this guy would be passing this row of squatters living by the drain every day on his way home and on his way out of home. But he has become immune to it. So one of the worst things that can happen to us is becoming immune to things that are right under your nose, because you just have come to accept it as that's the way life is. You know, how do we change that? Because a lot of these things are right under our nose. You know, we can just walk past and see it. It doesn't have to be Mumbai. To a lesser extent, it happens even right in our own neighborhood. I'm not sure whether you call it apathy or is it just being conditioned? How do we change that part of it?
Which is why volunteerism is so important, to get people engaged and take them away from their daily routine and see something. Because when you're taken away to do something dedicated, special, I think your mind and your eyes should be able to open. So I'm a big believer in volunteerism, not just because they can actually contribute, but it gives the person the chance to receive
And it's
and
transformational.
reopen and transform.
Yeah, I think that dimension of volunteerism is important, and I think it probably needs to be made a lot clearer.
Yeah.
And the other thing is,
Maybe if I can just add on
Yeah,
the
please.
volunteerism. You raised the question earlier or before this talk with me as to, you know, you were apprehensive about people going away to
To
volunteer
Cambodia.
in Cambodia. What does that mean? What does it mean for our society? And for me, actually, it doesn't matter because it gives them the chance to be shocked a little, because I'm not sure they can be shocked in Singapore as much as if they are sent to a country further away where poverty is apparent, very, very plain, not complicated. And that's when they have to move out of their comfort zone. They see it and they come home, and then they become sensitized, and that's when you start thinking and feeling the sense of nearness.
Well, the only reason why I brought up that point in my earlier conversation was, many of our schools, our children, school students, they do social work. And the standard places would be Cambodia, parts of Indonesia, Philippines, and so, to do social work. But when I asked them, do you know where Red Hill is? Bukit Ho Swee? Kreta Ayer? They said, what? No, so I'm not criticizing, don't get me wrong. I'm saying that there's nothing wrong with going to Cambodia. But there is something wrong if you don't know what's happening right under your nose. That we have people who can do with a bit more help from you in Singapore. So I feel that sometimes we just need to do a little bit of correction. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but we can do a little bit more of this. I find it shocking that a lot of our youth, young people, a lot, and I mean that, don't know some of these places.
I think volunteerism can correct that.
But how?
Right? Meaning it's not just Cambodia, of course.
Yeah.
From there, you can actually start getting them circling around
So
the rest
the
of
question is,
Singapore.
do you have a plan to make this happen a lot more?
Yes.
Because if you
This
just
is-
leave it
yeah, yeah.
to the schools,
Yeah.
you just still carry on. But do you, as NCSs, do you have a larger plan?
Yes. I think for NCSS, our main target at the moment is the corporates.
Okay.
There's also the National Volunteer Philanthropy Center.
Yes.
So together we're actually working this
NVPC.
out. And their focus is really much more on volunteerism.
Okay. Maybe this is a good time for us to throw it open to the floor. Quite a few of you looked a bit. Maybe you're reflecting. Okay. Yes. First question.
My name is Wei. I'd like to thank Mr. Hsieh for supporting Pig Dot in a way that Pig Dot, the event that's held every year for LGBT people. I contribute about 10% of its annual budget, but that money did not equal the impact of the one very long and significant letter that Mr. Hsieh wrote on the Straits Times to support the cause of my people. And I thank you very, very much for that. No other business leader has ever done that for us. And that,
Could you share with us a bit more details, please?
Mr. Hsieh wrote in support of our rights to exist as gay people in Singapore. He shared with us how during his childhood his father used to invite all kinds of people to his home, including a cross-dressing, very entertaining cross-dressing person, and how that person was really no different from anyone else, and how society matured or changed over the years of how it viewed gay people. At first in the 60s, they were simply tolerated. In the 70s and 80s, they became submerged because of more intolerant attitudes, and that's changed in the last decade, thanks to captains of industry like Mr. Hsieh. And for that, I'm very grateful. But I also would like to tackle the question of mixed signals that you brought up. 2 years ago, I tried to start a charity to tackle the orphan issue, the disadvantaged youth issue in education. I registered a charity that would allow professional practicing psychiatrists and psychotherapists to donate 1 hour of their time pro bono to needy children who could not afford therapy. And these people, I interviewed 126 students in Assumption Pathway School, and a lot of them displayed very simple, fixable problems like ADHD, dyslexia, PTSD from abusive families, post-traumatic stress disorder from abusive families, and even just short attention spans. They weren't retarded, although they were put in that school because they failed the conventional education system. So I started to register this charity for that, to cure that purpose, and the MOE came in to interview me, asked me a lot of questions about what I was doing, And then went all quiet on my charity registration. 1 month later, the MOE announced their own scheme, exactly the same as what I put out on the front page of the newspapers, Straits Times. And I consulted with the CEO at the time, Ms. Ang Bilian, about this issue, and she kind of implied on a very private basis that the government did not always support all private initiatives when it comes to stealing the limelight on solving certain problems. And I was wondering what the experience of NCSS has been with regards to significant, I'm an entrepreneur, and so I apply entrepreneurial solutions, private commercial solutions to a social issue. And it seems that the government stands in the way of innovation in the charity sector. And that makes it very difficult for a person like me to really try to solve the issue in a very, very simple and commercially viable way. And I was just wondering if you had any views on any similar occurrences, or have there been any times where NCSS has come in and said and rescued a program like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Wei.
I can't comment on your situation because clearly I'm not aware of it myself. All I would say is try again. Seriously, because that's what the field of passionate people must be. Try again, and this time come and see us again, and we'll see how we can help you.
So
because clearly we are trying to encourage more and more charities
Absolutely.
to emerge. So that unfortunate incident, mustn't deter you or your friends from trying again.
Yeah. And when he says come visit us, he really meant come visit me. No, but at some point, you just need to pursue what you believe in. And if at some point, and if you give up, it just means that you don't believe in it enough. That's my view. So if it matters enough to you, open new doors when old doors shut. Do it, and wish you all the best, Wei.
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, my name is Tan Si Peng, graduate of the then University of Malaya, 1955. I have two questions actually to ask. First thing, you are fortunate to have a model father who bring in all sort of charitable work and so on. But what I was thinking, what if your father is a different personality than what you believe him to be? Then will you still be interested in all this charitable work? Right?
You want to answer now?
Right. So,
Second question.
yeah. Second question is, it takes a very curious people to find out what is the need of the disabled, this group, that group, the foreign workers, and so on. So if you are not curious enough, you just say, don't care, it's not my business, the government's business, it's a social welfare business, none of my affair. So why should you come here and create trouble? Therefore, it takes a lot of person with a very curious personality to find out what are the needs of your neighbor, of your immediate, your fellow worker as well, and so on. So that sort of personality, who can spot it, I want to know, right? Some of you see them, then you say, nothing like, you just brag, nothing more. Therefore, for those people who have all this ability, then they also need a platform. So without a platform, without an association or something like that, you are nowhere, right? You yourself alone cannot be looking after so many people, so many charities, as you said. Therefore, you need an association or NGO with people with similar ideas or a passion to get it organized. That's why, so no use like NATO, no action, talk only. We need to do something. Therefore, that's something somebody must go and organize to have a platform and do something. Can you comment on it?
But when you were in university, you started the organization by yourself with a few friends, right?
Yeah,
you don't need to always set up an organization and bureaucracy and so on.
Well, you can do things alone. You can actually harness volunteers. So, the more you want to do, the more actually you bring resources together.
And people will
But
be
you can
drawn.
start as one.
Yes, one.
You know, you can start as one. But why don't I just
Yeah,
quickly
please.
answer first your first question about what if you don't have a role model father? But let me say to you, no role model is perfect. My father was a mostly imperfect man. So much as I have said the inspiring part of him, there are parts of him which didn't inspire me one bit. So this is really what life is about. Actually, we find heroes everywhere. And my point is really not to look for the perfect man, the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs.
You mean
but
they're
actually,
They're perfect?
absolutely. They actually exist around us. And it's for you to spot your own hero, your own role model, for what you believe in. And I see them in my life, many role models. So that's my first question, my first answer. You don't have to just spot your father. There are others. You can be a school teacher, a colleague, your boss, anyone. They can actually inspire you if you allow yourself to be inspired. Number two.
No, sorry, one moment. I think the thrust of his question really is, you are fortunate to, I mean, even though your father may have had imperfections, the fact is that you are fortunate to have someone at a formative stage in your life to sort of plant the seed, to use your word, right? His question is, what if you didn't have the chance for that seed to be planted early in life? I think it's a fair question.
I see it as really allowing yourself, that heart, to have that seed planted. So in a way, it's a voluntary act on your part. You can be very disillusioned with your father because there are sides of him which actually disillusions me greatly. Or do you choose to see that light in him, which shone so bright, and receive that light? Now, it doesn't have to be him. It could be, I mean, in school you read about great figures, learn about great figures. Do they inspire you? I remember being very inspired by a number of great figures at that time that I read about, learned about in history books. So do they inspire you? So it's about wanting to be inspired and seeking inspiration. And that's what I'm trying to say. You can seek inspiration in many different people. It doesn't have to be your family.
Okay.
Two, your comment about how you need a platform or you need this curiosity. Yes, absolutely, no question about it. But it begins with the heart, not with the mind. Once you've got the heart, and that's what businessmen are, they actually have that instinct, that sense, and that's when I have observed actually businessmen are the keenest observers in the areas of passion to them, which is why they're so successful. So the heart has to be there. So the inspiration must come, and then you start acting, and then you start exploring. So when I wanted to get involved in the field of mental health, it took me many months to study it, which is your point about curiosity, before I knew what to do and how to do it, and be useful and contribute.
Next question, comment? Yes, please.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Fu Hua. I'm a student of NUS, so it seems I'm the audience that you are looking out for,
Yes,
since
indeed.
earlier you said that you wanted to speak to students. So, okay, recently my team and I, we had the privilege of organizing the, not sure if you heard of Project Rise, where we actually tie up with Sheng Siong to deliver rice to skip generation families and under $400 per capita income. So, I managed to talk to many beneficiaries and different organizations like Mafatong or other organizations as well. And it seems like there's an issue with the social service sector in Singapore. Give me a moment, I load my questions. Okay, we realized that one issue that we have in Singapore there's a lot of on this dependency theory, in which whether those rental apartments, those pay $30 a month, the poorest or the poor where Singaporeans actually stay, they actually have a lot of food, some of them are even packed very nicely. So it seems like Singaporeans are giving a lot, and it's not solving the problem because the people are actually just waiting at their door for the food instead of going down. Some innovative solutions actually brought up by other organizations is Volcor and all this to make the beneficiaries actually go down to their FSCs or the SACs to actually collect. But it seems like this dependency theory is perpetuating. So I would like to, my first question is that how do we actually overcome this issue in view that the beneficiaries in this case will be the poor in Singapore? That means we are not talking about a disability, children with disabilities and such. So how do we actually overcome this dependency theory where most Singaporeans feel that giving food and money is the best way? And also, in other questions that I would like to bring up is on volunteer management, because I think a lot of youths these days, they would engage in voluntary work and social work because it's their prime of their life, and because they are not doing outside jobs or what, where they will be too busy with work. So one issue that I think a lot of organizations face, including the project and my team and the organization which I serve, was that the volunteers do not feel okay, because a lot of these projects actually require a lot of on the ground job where a lot of the hands and legs are needed. So most volunteers, they will just feel that they are manual labor and there's no volunteer development in this case. Okay. Some of the solutions is that we actually try to give them planning positions and all this so that they will feel more engaged, but it will definitely not be able to cater with the youths who will be inspired to actually carry on to actually do volunteering, especially there on the ground.
Question?
So my question is, how do we actually deal with this? So my first question will be on how do we deal with the dependency part, and my second is, do you have any recommendation on the volunteer development? And what should we actually do to help the skip generation and for the poor under $400 per capita? Thanks.
All right, thank you.
There were 2 or 3 questions there, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
say. We may need to go back to you telling us a question, please. Thank you.
It's okay. I think we'll
just in case,
we'll just respond to what you've
please.
so that others will have a chance to ask.
Yeah.
First, I think on perhaps what you call the dependency, the poor people you saw in a one-room flat, which I've seen. I've done the same as you've done, giving out the food and the rations for their monthly existence. First, I want to say I don't want to judge them as to whether they have too much or they are dependent. First and foremost is perhaps as someone who wants to engage in the field of charity is to study the problem. So you have observed something. So why don't you now decide what do you think is relevant for them? As opposed to say they're dependent and therefore perhaps some people might just take the conclusion, come to this conclusion, actually no need to distribute anymore. And if everybody comes to the same conclusion, they will actually have no food. And in fact, what is given to them, you also have to check. Is it really serving them in terms of, yes, there's rice to eat, but does it give them nutrition? So is their health good? And not just physical health, is their mind good? Are they in good spirit? So if we start understanding such people, then you begin to realize, or at least figure out what they may need, and then find the solution which actually can address it. Which is why I say finding how to serve properly takes a time. Mr. Tan has raised it and said, look, you really got to engage your mind. It's not just your heart. And you've got to be curious, you've got to probe and think it through your way and find the answer. 2, your second question was on volunteers and preparing them. I think there are 2 parts to it. Preparing volunteers is certainly one, and this is where NCSS is now paying much more attention, working with the VWOs to actually work on preparing their capability to absorb volunteers and make the work meaningful.
So is it NCSS or NVPC that does this?
Both. We'll have to look at this as a joint problem because we work with the VWOs, and if the VWOs do not take volunteers and know how to use them properly, then again you have the same problem. Okay. And of course, if volunteers are not well prepared, you have a problem too. So I think the 2 must come together. But above that, actually, we also need volunteer leaders. So one of the issues I would say in any charity is leadership. Be it in the social service field, be it in volunteering. Leaders are always needed because that's how you can make breakthrough, that's how you can actually harness capabilities, that's how you can inspire people. So I would say, that to me is really important, finding leaders in the charity sector. And hence why there's this initiative now to foster leaders professionally. But I think we also need those who are actually dedicated, to volunteer themselves as leaders in the sector.
If I may ask you a follow-up question on leadership. Thank you very much. The difference between managers and leaders, right? So you can transplant professionally trained managers from the corporate sector, who are good in managing, who are good in coming up with ROIs, IRRs, managing your financial statements and so on, which is necessary. So it doesn't just become a bleeding heart issue. But managers manage, but you still need people, especially in this sector, who are visionaries.
Yes.
Who are driven by a larger calling, so to speak, but who may not have the managerial skills. So how would you say you balance the need and the importance of having leaders and managers? Either extreme is bad.
Yeah.
What's the balance?
Well, both need each other.
Okay.
Definitely. And I think it begins, which is where there hasn't been enough attention on, is the role of a board in voluntary organizations. Not just as a check, but to play that very wise role of managing the passion with capability. I think that's something which we started off earlier.
Yes.
Capability and passion.
So my question really is, how do you bridge that? Because we can swing to one extreme. In many ways, in Singapore, we tend to swing a lot more towards what is quantifiable, and really about management. But when we come to leadership and vision, people tend to be a little bit more uncomfortable about that.
No shortcuts to it. It has to really permeate right through from board to management. So it's about now, how do we actually go about developing this?
Is there something in the education system that we can help to stimulate this?
Well, I think the education system shouldn't just focus on this alone,
of course.
Right? I mean, this is needed
Absolutely.
in almost every sphere of endeavor, passion and ability, skills. So what I'm addressing is really in the charitable sector today. It has to certainly be at the board level. So therefore, having a much more competent board and getting more competent people to come onto boards who have the heart for it. So it's not about competence alone. Number two, fostering leaders, not just managers, who are professionally dedicated in this field.
Okay, I've got a question from the online participants. Can we put it up, please? Do you think the government should stipulate that employees of large corporations do a minimum number of community service hours every month? It's a very typical Singapore question. I mean, I'm asking this because let's legislate. Let's make it top down.
What I've seen, and in fact this comes from enlightened corporations, I mean, it should be from business leaders themselves making that choice for their own company. Not so much to insist that they do, but to perhaps inspire, encourage, employees to actually volunteer themselves. And this you now find in a number of leading companies all over the world.
Do you think the Singapore corporations or homegrown corporations are moving fast enough in the right direction?
Early days, so whether they're moving fast is really no more than for them to see the opportunity and the need and the usefulness. Because when you have employees who actually get stimulated this way, as I said, you bring home, you open a window, you help him to see. And once he starts seeing, he understands a lot of issues, not just with the social service sector or charity, but actually he becomes very finely tuned to observing things around, as Mr. Tan was saying, to have that curious mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. King Jun, please. Can we have King Jun first? Could you give us your IC number, please?
My name is Keng Jun, Business School Alumni. I have an observation and a question. I want to touch on the point you made about passion and capability. My observation is there are a lot of people who want to do good things and they have the passion for it, but they cannot sustain it. And very often you find VWOs, after the passion of the founder fades, want to die also cannot die, want to go on cannot also. So
You just drift.
You know, you just drift along. So I believe that we need to have economy of scale, and I've been to a few NCSS events where I feel that there are a lot of people who do the same thing in small little charities of their own, you know. So my question is, can we therefore, through the auspices of NCSS or even NVPC, put together people who have similar platforms and get the economy of scale to help them sustain this? Otherwise, it's such a waste that, you know, everybody want to do their little bit, and then they have their own little kingdom that they want to fight, and turf that they want to fight on. And then it fails after a while.
Can I just firstly make the distinction, you know, between what I call an impulse and passion? Impulse is sporadic. Passion burns and continues to burn, so it has much more endurance. So perhaps what we see, in fact, that's the real issue. We feel near, but it's actually just an impulse. It's not a real engagement of your nearness. You see something, right? It moves your heart. Yes, that's nearness, but it's a very short-lived one. Why? Because you're responding impulsively as opposed to passionately, which means it grows. It burns in you. It doesn't go away. You've seen it, and it stays in your mind. It haunts you. It really drives you. So what we really need are people who are passionate as opposed to impulsive. Impulsive giving is needed, but not enough. Impulsive engagement is needed, but not enough, because actually it will be short-lived if it doesn't develop into a passion. So that's my first comment. Second is actually, I think it's good to have many charities. Getting them to come together to have a more stronger platform to scale up is a challenge, because by nature these are very individualistic people, and that's when they actually, you know, perhaps charities have to fail. It's like business. You cannot guarantee success, and charities therefore must come to a point where they actually no longer serve the purpose and they must fail. And they must be allowed to fail and encouraged to fail. Because otherwise, you know, you will have a lot of suboptimal organizations.
The one suggestion I have is perhaps, you know, awareness. NCSS maybe can make this more well known, that there are already charities out there fulfilling certain causes, and therefore, you know, we don't need more of the same. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go merge with these guys or join this guy, do the same thing.
King Jun, I see your point, if I may. For me, I must admit, I'm a bit troubled by this conversation, because there's a risk of corporatizing ideals. This is not businesses. This is about an individual's passion. He may not be the most efficient person, but he believes in something. Who are we to label it as impulse? I mean, with due respect, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether we are in a position to be judge and jury and decide that this guy is wasting his time. If he's wasting his time, he's wasting his time. But the point is, even if he touches 2 lives in the course of what he's doing, is that not meaningful? It may not be meaningful from a corporate definition, from an economies of scale, macroeconomic definition, but for him, he's touched 2 lives. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, sometimes when we try and transplant corporate ideas into an area which is somewhat different and driven differently and wired differently with a different DNA, you, pardon the expression, you bastardize the ideal. And that can be very painful. And I am troubled by this, because I've met individuals who go out there and say, look, I just have great satisfaction in doing this. I'm not here to prove a point. I'm happy to do this. It's not efficient, but it's my time and I'm spending it. Why not let 1,000 inefficient flowers bloom? I mean, I'm being provocative.
No, I support that. I mean, it's not provocative at all. I mean,
Yeah.
you raise a very point which is really emblematic of what the social service sector is about.
Yeah.
I think there's room for both, for those who want to scale and really provide
If you
a
want to
service,
scale, yes.
And for those who don't want to, and they must face the consequence of not
Yeah.
scaling, right? Whatever.
And they're happy.
Is an individual choice.
It's an individual
But
choice.
I want to correct you there. It's not an impulsive. They actually pursue their conviction that way. It's actually a passion.
Yeah.
An impulse, I'm just saying, is really more one where you have got to self-check yourself, right? Can you burn? If you can't burn on, then you know.
Yeah. But I think this is an interesting point for us to reflect on, and I'm glad you qualified it, because I do meet more and more, in fact today I meet a lot more individuals who say, I want to do something in my pastime, a small venture with a group of 3 friends, and I want to do it, and they sustain it. It's not going to scale. They have no intentions of scaling it, but they're happy because twice a week they go out there and they do it. Makes them happy individuals. And really at the end of the day, I think it's about not imposing systems and processes to everything. Some amount of spontaneity is not a bad thing, not necessarily a bad thing. Unless there's a fiercely burning question. Is there?
Good evening, Mr. Hsieh, Mr. Viswaran, and everyone in this room.
Call me Fu Hua.
Good evening.
The
Hi.
student call me Fu Hua.
I'm Madam Tan. I'm not the alumnus, but I'm the mother of the alumnus. Now, I have one feedback is that just now you mentioned about those living in the rental house. Actually many are not eligible for these free rations, to be honest with you. But then getting these free rations, I will say that they are rather silly. Because the food unhealthy, as you mentioned. Yes, because it's due for expired. Like Loving Heart, Loving Heart, I think you should know. They don't need come up any money. Actually, it's all the manufacturer of this food, this canned food, given them, and it's due to expire, And then they start serving to these poor people, which I find that in long term, they will die faster because it's not going to do good to their health. Okay? So that's my feedback. So those volunteers, many are undesirable people. They got a personal agenda. Maybe you won't know, under National Council of Social Service. Another feedback to you is that, can you make a difference? Since you are chairman of UOB, can you waive the $2? The $2 for those fall below average, right? A month, you must maintain 500. 500
I
per
think
day.
the second question is not relevant to this discussion.
No, you're chairman of UOB.
This is called entrapment. And as the chair, I'm not going to allow it. If you want, and if you're strong enough, you can ambush him outside. But in this forum, why don't we just allow Fu Hua to respond to the first point.
The first point,
feedback.
okay.
No, I think firstly on healthy
thank you.
food, that's my concern too. I mean, in the giving, which is why I said, take a closer look what you give. It's the right thing to do, like you say. People give out of their own hearts,
Yes.
but I think we can take that further effort, using your mind and study the problem. But correction there, actually expired food doesn't mean they're unhealthy. In fact, I'm told by many manufacturers, expired food is still very good for consumption for a long time to come. Because they are made with, obviously, how shall I say, very high standards, especially canned food. They last far longer than the expiry date suggests.
But it's a bit risky. Depends on what kind of expired
Let's
food
say
it is.
I eat them myself. I do believe in eating, but not necessarily unhealthy. I'm talking on now, foods which is unhealthy, even if they're not past the expiry date. So it's really giving them the right balance of food, the nutrition in short.
I think, yes, final question. It's got to be the final question. You've got to walk faster.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you three
Your
questions.
name, please.
My name is Jonathan.
Jonathan.
And I'm going to ask you three questions. First one, 27 years after you met the great man in the cabinet room, have you now found your long-term plan in life? If so, how did you find it? And what learnings would you have shared to your 33-year-old self? Second question.
What were the
learnings? What were the learnings? Okay. Second question is, as a corporate chief, how are you triggering a paradigm shift within your organization from being the cost of living and giving to being the benefit of giving at a personal staff level?
This one sounds like a poem, you know.
Sorry, repeat that again. Yeah.
Yes,
Hello,
it's basically
in basic English, can no?
No, it's okay.
Can. The third one.
No, the second question is.
Your second question, in basic
Well,
English.
Yeah. It's just that at UOB, how are you motivating your staff, from switching, their views of how the discourse is being the cost of living, everyday cost of living, and therefore it makes it expensive to give, to being, the benefit of giving. What do I get, from giving itself? I mean, how are you triggering that at the organization level?
In the corporate setting.
Yeah.
Especially since he's also at the same time president of NCSS.
Exactly.
So how do you walk the talk in your own organization?
Okay.
And adding a bit,
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it. At the last part is actually a very personal level. You referenced a passage from the Bible for your talk, and so are your convictions and actions derived from being a Christian or being inspired and seeded by your father? I mean, which came first and now drives you?
Quite good when you speak plain English. Okay. Okay. Yes.
First question. The big question in my life. I think that question remains, I suppose, throughout my life. And I would interpret it differently, not as your what's your long-term objective, as if it was a goal, a destination. But for me, I look at it as, who do I want to be? Rather than what do I want to be. So that's my quest. Who do I want to be? It's my long-term question. Who do I want to be? And which is why it drives me the way it drives me. Rather than what do I want to be?
So who do you want to be?
That's something I would leave for not tonight. But I think that's for everyone to ask themselves. Because what do I want to be? Yeah, many people want things. And that's really what is entrapping this society, or all societies, modern societies. We are caught up with the what, rather than who do I want to be. Because when you think of who, then you become much more liberated. What makes you stuck in a certain mode of thinking? Two, your next question was on, sorry.
UOB chairman.
Okay,
NCSS
I did say
president.
to you earlier, right? I believe in sharing and then leaving it to people at the right time to do the right thing. And it's about planting the seed, and the time will come, rather than actually, like in anything in life, if you have children, you know it. You can't push them to do what they're not ready to do. And that applies to all of us. We're not, going to be pushed.
But
And
is
I
there
think
anything you think you can do?
in any setting, whether it's UOB or any organization, I believe we are there to actually make that difference, right? And to try and do our part to change and to bring about that ideal you have in mind that should come, rather than actually forcing an agenda. So it shouldn't be agenda-driven, because that's where it's not fair, because each organization has its own agenda. It's about influencing it, sharing it, and then people then see the need to do it.
So it's about influencing as opposed to imposing.
Yes. I'm in no
Okay.
place to impose in the first instance, right? It's a commercial organization.
Okay.
That's its, but hopefully they are enlightened about how they make money, like every company should be. And of course, living the talk in what you do yourself. So that's always very important, to be consistent. It's not just, speaking the talk, but also walking the talk yourself. So therefore, your own conviction, your own cost, at your own cost. The third question was on?
A Christian and a father.
Oh, yeah, whether my father was a bigger influence or...
Which was the stronger and...
Which came first, is it? Oh, naturally, the father planted the seed, so... But if you are a spiritual... Take away the word Christian. I see myself more interested in engaged in spirituality. So if you're looking at spirituality, I think it began long before even my father. I think this is a deep embedded spirit in us. All of us have it. And however you discover it, whether it's through Christianity or another religion. And my father was only one of the many angels which came into my life, as many would have come into your life. So the question is, do you notice the angels? That's my whole point. Do you see the angels in your life?
Well, I guess that's a good point to end on the note of angels. I guess the thought that's on my mind, which is unanswered, is you are a spiritual being. Are we all? What about the many who may not be as spiritual and therefore not gifted with the ability to see the angels even as they sit right in front of you? What happens? I guess that's a question that perhaps Fu Hua is leaving unanswered so that we can mull over on our own, right? It leaves me to thank Fu Hua. You have, personally, I think you didn't answer that many questions directly. But I don't think that is necessarily unfair. In not answering the question, you've actually answered some of them. And I think a certain discomfort in certain dialogue, certain aspects of dialogue, actually speaks a lot. Because it is not about a set answer. It is about reflecting on circumstances and looking at yourself. And I think for me, that's the most important thing that's happened today. You've made me look at myself and ask certain questions. Not necessarily all in agreement with you, but to ask certain questions of myself. And I think these dialogues are important as we go full swing to achieve certain goals as defined in our society. So tonight was actually not a You Alive dialogue, it was a retreat. And thank you for facilitating the retreat. Right? Please join me in thanking Fu Hua. And in my interactions with Fu Hua, one of the things that's always struck me as being consistent, okay, is that he is a person who is calm, composed, but we should not interpret that as not having passion and conviction. I've seen it, I've seen that passion, I've seen it manifest, but sometimes this sort of passion is a lot more potent because you get the work done. And we're very proud of you for being one of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we don't want you to go back empty-handed. We know that you are not very rich these days. So we'll give you something that's very valuable, a picture with me.
Thank you.
It's a lovely picture of the two of us. I'm
Yes.
better looking. This is a gift from us to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And this, my friend, is
Yes.
is something where we'd like you to say something about us, about me in particular. Here, okay? You can write something. You want to read it?
Just do it now.
Just do it now. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us for some. Thank you.